Well, folks, we'll get into all the news in just one moment, and much news there is. First, Matt Walsh's film, Am I Racist? It's the comedy that's now the biggest documentary of the decade. It's streaming exclusively at Daily Wire Plus, which is why you should subscribe. It's breaking records as our biggest day one release ever. More on that a little bit later. First, here's a bit of the trailer in case you missed it.
What do you feel in your body when you hear the term white people?
I feel like a cringe about it. Cringe is a good word.
White, straight, cisgender man is the top of the pile.
So I'm on the top of the pile. It's me.
Can I just propose a toast? Raise a glass if you're racist. To racist.
That was really weird.
Don't deny that you're racist. Try not to be racist, but also don't realize that you're.
Until we're willing to talk about these things, healing can't really begin.
My daughter's 4 years old. She's still watching Disney movies and choosing a white princess.
Have you talked to her about that?
All the time.
Is racism inherent to whiteness?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, probably.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Did race exist as a reality before?
We made race exist.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. What do you mean? What you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you.
Am I Racist? Now streaming only on Daily Wire Plus. Rated PG-13.
Alrighty, on to the news. So yesterday, I was sitting around wondering what exactly is the October surprise for the Democrats, for the media going to be? I mean, we're 1 week out from an election, and they ain't got much. We'll get to their attacks on Tony Hinchcliffe and supposed jokes about Puerto Ricans that are too terrible for anyone to even be near, and all of this sort of stuff. But is that really all they got in their bag? And then yesterday afternoon, I received a text. I received a text from a reporter at the New York Times. And that text read thusly. Good day, Mr. Shapiro. I hope you're well. I'm Nico Grant, a reporter at the New York Times. I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment for an upcoming article that takes a look at how political commentators have discussed the upcoming election on YouTube. We rely on an analysis conducted by researchers at Media Matters for America. Could you kindly provide us with a comment or decline to comment by the end of day tomorrow, Tuesday, October 29th? Thank you so much for your time. Here are the points we plan to include. Media Matters identified 286 YouTube videos between May and August that contained election misinformation, including narratives that have been debunked or are not supported with credible evidence. Researchers identified videos posted by you in those 4 months that contain election misinformation. We feature a clip of you saying, quote, your party rigged many of the voting rules in advance of the election in order to ensure an extraordinary number of mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting. I also have a few questions. 1, are you a member of the YouTube Partner Program? 2, if so, how frequently does YouTube demonetize your videos? 3, has YouTube sent you messages, emails, or notices in the last year that your content contains misinformation? Thanks for your time. So, here is what's going on here. This is not just a text. This is the October surprise. Here's what the New York Times was planning pretty obviously and clearly. Working with Media Matters for America, which is a far-left radical organization that was started by David Brock in an overt attempt to destroy all conservative media. That is why Media Matters was launched. It was launched in order to astroturf boycotts on conservative media and anyone who had advertised with conservative media. Media Matters became incredibly famous by essentially launching secondary boycotts on people like Rush Limbaugh. They've tried it with us as well. They've tried it with our hosts. This is what they do. The New York Times is overtly, clearly admitting to using Media Matters research in order to pressure YouTube to demonetize people on the right, to destroy them, because when you are demonetized, that also limits your reach, to destroy their dissemination of information 1 week prior to an election. That's what's going on here. It turns out the October surprise from our media is an overt attempt, along with Media Matters. Again, both of these parties are Democratic apparatchiks, Media Matters and the New York Times, in order to silence dissent 1 week out from an election. That is what this is about. That's what the text is about. That's the entire game. You run an article on the front page of the New York Times saying, YouTube is subsidizing election misinformation. And that pressures YouTube, which, by the way, is Google, which is the #1 donor to the Democratic Party. The #1 donor to the Democratic Party. You push them to censor any and all hosts, any and all information that disagrees with the left. Because here's the thing. They didn't just reach out to me. As we now know, they reached out to pretty much everybody on the right. Other hosts from the Daily Wire, people like Tucker Carlson, they reached out to everyone on the right. Why? Because their goal is to shut the spigot off so you can't get any information on places like YouTube. 26% of Americans get their news from YouTube, according to Pew. Now, that number theoretically is even higher because those are people who are getting most of their news from YouTube. But there are people who are engaging with news on YouTube without even knowing it. Because that's where political ads run. It's where you watch a non-political video, and then you're pushed to a political video, and you watch it for 5 minutes before you tune out to the next DIY trick on how to fix up your home or something. Shutting off the spigot on news information 1 week in advance of an election, that is the New York Times trick. And obviously, it's not about election misinformation. It's not about shutting down, quote unquote, bad information, as everybody knows. How do I know that? Because they reached out to me about election misinformation. To me, of all people. If you listen to the show, you know that I've been perfectly consistent since November of 2020 that I believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. I thought that Donald Trump had every right to legally challenge that election, but I did not see the actual evidence that the allegations he was making about the election itself and fraud in the election was sufficient to overcome the state certification of the ballots. So of all the people to come to about election misinformation, coming to me is just proof. It is just absolute proof. This has nothing to do with election misinformation. It has to do instead with silencing anybody on the right. That is the goal. And this is always the goal for the left. It's always the goal for the New York Times. Think about how crazy this is. You have the New York Times, which is supposed to be the tip of the spear in terms of freedom of the press and free speech, which is overtly, clearly attempting to pressure the biggest video platform on planet Earth to shut off other press outlets. That's crazy. They say it's a challenge to the press if Donald Trump calls them fake news. Imagine if we here at the Daily Wire called for the New York Times to be completely demonetized and shut down on social media because of misinformation. Would that not be a challenge to free speech principles? It's unbelievable, truthfully. And what's hilarious is that even the quote they sent me, which was supposed to be election misinformation, right? The quote where I said, apparently, quote, your party rigged many of the voting rules in advance of the election in order to ensure an extraordinary number of mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting. Well, I mean, if they're mad about that, they might want to talk to the New York Times. Here is 538 writing just a couple of years ago, quote, one of the most striking aspects of the 2020 election was the unprecedented use of mail-in voting. Nearly half of all voters cast a ballot by mail in 2020, a record share, according to the latest survey of the performance of American elections, a post-election poll of tens of thousands of registered voters run by MIT. Much of this was driven by COVID-19. States changed voting rules and requirements to make it easier to vote by mail, and voters hoping to avoid crowded polling places in the middle of a pandemic took advantage. Wait, that sounds like rigging the voting rules in order to, increase mail-in balloting. Maybe they ought to fact-check the New York Times. The New York Times ought to fact-check the New York Times for election misinformation. Maybe they ought to fact-check CBS News about ballot harvesting. Quote, the Nevada Assembly passed legislation that would allow the state to mail a ballot to every registered voter, and the bill allows for third parties to collect ballots. Fearson argues that the threat to Postal Service funding and the warning of mail delays makes ballot assistance even more important. But critics argue it opens the door to abuse and interference. The Nevada law does not limit how many ballots a person can collect. The Trump re-election campaign filed a lawsuit against the measure in Nevada and in other states. Wait, that sounds like rigging the rules so as to increase ballot harvesting. Maybe they should fact check for election information. CBS News. But it's not about that. By the way, even if you disagree with me, even if you think that the election was rigged and Trump won, that's still protected by the First Amendment. Obviously. But this is amazing. So in 2020, the late-breaking media interference came in the form of shutting down the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post had the Hunter Biden laptop story, and the social media bros were pressured into taking down that story by both the press and by members of the federal intelligence agencies. And so they shut it down. They throttled it. They prevented dissemination of the story on places like Facebook and on Twitter, because this is before Elon owned Twitter, obviously. Well, now they are doing something even more overt. They are overtly attempting to just shut down all conservative dissemination of information on the biggest video platform in existence 1 week in advance of an election. If that's not an attempt to rig an election, I don't know what is. I mean, if you rig the entire informational environment around an election, that obviously has a rather large impact on the election. We're told by these people that the Russians manipulated America into voting for Donald Trump in 2016. But here they are, the same people, openly saying that they want YouTube to demonetize and thus throttle all conservative content on YouTube 1 week in advance of an election. Because that's what this is about. That's what this is about. I mean, we know what the New York Times is doing. Literally this week, the Sunday opinion section had an entire page in bold, probably 30-point font saying, quote, Donald Trump says he will prosecute his enemies, order mass deportations, use soldiers against citizens, abandon allies, play politics with disasters. Believe him. We know their agenda. Their agenda is perfectly clear. And that agenda is to get Kamala Harris elected at any cost, including the cost of the First Amendment. I wonder why there's a trust problem in media. I wonder why there's such a trust problem in media. Speaking of trust problems in media, CNN, another major left-wing outlet that tries to pretend that it's objective. There's sort of an amazing exchange on CNN yesterday. So Mehdi Hasan, who has long been a Qatari-funded anti-Israel, anti-Semitic operative, Mehdi Hasan, he was on CNN after losing his job over at MSNBC, and he got into an argument with Ryan Girdusky, who is one of the only conservative commentators on the network. Hasan proceeds to call Girdusky and every Republican a Nazi. And Girdusky responds in kind by making a joke about Mehdi Hasan being a member of Hezbollah. And everything breaks down.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing it.
You've been called an anti-Semite more than anyone else at this table.
Yeah.
And people will sit there and, no, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. Okay. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off.
Okay, and Mehdi Hasan is shocked. How dare you? How dare you suggest that I'm a member of a terrorist group? How dare you? Okay, number one, that's a joke, whereas what Mehdi Hasan is saying about Ryan Girdusky is not a joke. He calls him a Nazi. Ryan Girdusky responds with a little quip about him being a member of Hezbollah. Well, maybe the reason that mistake might be made is because Mehdi Hasan has overtly supported every single opponent of the state of Israel in the history of the state of Israel. He pretends that he's anti-groups like Hamas, but then spends all day, every day talking about the predations of Israel and why what Israel's doing in the Gaza Strip is a genocide and all this kind of stuff. That's Mehdi Hasan's bag. My friend Douglas Murray has had debates with him about this sort of stuff, obviously. So have others. Well, folks, with things so heated, we know we have a big election coming up. And let me tell you, there is a lot at stake. And if Kamala Harris gets into office, well, that's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire that's already visible from space. Here's what you can do. Protect your savings by diversifying now into gold from my friends at Birch Gold. That's correct. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife. It can protect you now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news, it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Think about this for a second. In the past 4 years, while the buying power of the US dollar has declined faster than CNN's ratings, the price of gold has skyrocketed 40%. Is that a coincidence? No. So here's what you need to do. Text BEN to 989898. You'll get your free info kit on gold, and then you can diversify. As the exclusive gold partner of the Daily Wire for the past 8 years, you can trust Birch Gold, as I do, to protect your savings. Don't wait for the election results to start thinking about your financial future. Text BEN to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. That's BEN to the number 989898. Get all of your questions answered by my friends over at Birch Gold, and then when you're ready to invest, they're the people to talk to. Text BEN to 989898 to get started today. Also, you know what's really keeping America up at night? It's not just the radical left's latest attempts to destroy the country. It's also uncomfortable betting. That's why I've decked out my entire bed with Bull and Branch. Now, I don't usually change with the seasons because my principles are iron consistency. But when it comes to betting, totally different thing. Starting with the Bull and Branch Signature Collection, their 100% organic cotton sheets are like the Constitution for your bed. Foundational, timeless, getting better with age. They start off buttery soft. Somehow they get even softer with every wash. Plus, you can easily add their blankets, duvets, and quilts without making your bed feel heavy or hot. In fact, I actually take one of those on the road with me. Trust me, a fall refresh with Bull and Branch will have your mind changed for good. Best of all, Bull and Branch gives you a 30-night worry-free guarantee with free shipping and returns on all U.S. orders of $100 or more. Let me tell you, when you're fighting the culture war day in and day out, you need the sleep. Start getting your best sleep this fall with Bull and Branch. Enjoy 20% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bullandbranch.com/Ben. That's Bull and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/Ben for 20% off and free shipping. Exclusions apply. See site for details. It's the reaction of CNN that's telling here. So CNN immediately issues a statement and says that Girdusky is now banned from CNN. Not Hasan, not Mehdi Hasan, who calls every Republican a Nazi. If you were at MSG, if you were at Madison Square Garden with Donald Trump, you're a Nazi, understand? You're a Nazi. That means we can say whatever we want about you. But if you respond in kind by making a joke about your beeper going off, if you happen to be, fairly warm toward every group that wants to destroy Israel, then CNN will ban you. Quote, there is zero room for racism or bigotry at CNN or on our air, unless you're calling Trump supporters Nazis, of course. We aim to foster thoughtful conversations and debate, including between people who profoundly disagree with each other, in order to explore important issues and promote mutual understanding. But we will not allow guests to be demeaned or for the line of civility to be crossed. Ryan Girdusky will not be welcome back at our network. Well, I mean, clearly you will allow guests to be demeaned or for the line of civility to be crossed. You dedicated your network to having Mehdi Hasan, a man who has been caught on tape suggesting that homosexuals ought to be stoned and that non-Muslims are like cattle. You have that person on the air calling Americans Nazis, including Ryan Girdusky. Girdusky responds with a quip. Girdusky is banned. And here's Abby Phillip just bedecking herself in sackcloth and ashes and groveling before the woke left-wing machine because no one must ever offend the cherished intersectionality of people like Mehdi Hasan. Wow, a former Al Jazeera quote-unquote reporter.
Hey, I'm sure everyone has seen what happened on the show tonight. I just wanted to address one quick thing. As you may have seen, Ryan was asked to leave the show, and we have put out a statement saying that he's not welcome back on our air. There is a line here on this program, and it was crossed. But I want to be clear as well that we did not ask Mehdi to not come back. In fact, we really wanted him to come back and finish the show. We had a lot to talk to him about. And we really hope that he'll join us again soon. But for those of you who are wondering why he did not come back, I just want to be super clear that that was not in any way because we didn't want him back at all. And I won't speak for him, but I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that that was not what happened there.
The radical anti-Semitic propagandist, that guy needs to be back. The one who calls half of Americans Nazis, he needs to be back on CNN. The person who made a joke about that guy, never again, never again. And this is the game in the quote-unquote objective media. They're just left-wing agitprop. That's all. They're left-wing agitprop. And they're left-wing agitprop that do not really, truly allow serious dissenting points of view. And if you make a move toward allowing a dissenting point of view or opening a space for a conversation, a real conversation, the world comes down on your head at these places. Jeff Bezos is finding that out the hard way as the owner of the Washington Post. So you'll recall that earlier last week, the Washington Post announced they would not, in fact, put forth an endorsement of Kamala Harris. Now, it's pro forma. Everyone knows that the staff of the Washington Post editorial board loves Kamala Harris, carries around a drool cup for Kamala Harris, spends their evenings exploring Kamala Harris's colon with their heads. Everyone knows this. Okay, the Washington Post hasn't exactly been shy about their support of Kamala Harris. Their in-house conservative columnist is Jennifer Rubin. Okay, so everyone knows where they stand. Jeff Bezos, however, he said, we're not going to put forth an endorsement because guess what? We're a newspaper, which means we do news on paper. And that means that probably we should stick to, covering the news. So he actually was forced to put out a statement personally. It's called The Hard Truth, Americans Don't Trust the News Media. And I got to say, props to Jeff Bezos. And it's worth reading what he writes because at least Jeff Bezos gets it. He gets it. He understands the vast trust gap that has been established because of places like the New York Times seeking to shut down dissent or CNN, which suggests, again, Mehdi Hasan can call half of America Nazis. But if Ryan Girdusky makes a joke about beepers, bam, get out of here, Ryan. Here is Jeff Bezos, quote, in the annual public surveys about trust and reputation, journalists and the media have regularly fallen near the very bottom, often just above Congress. But in this year's Gallup poll, we have managed to fall below Congress. Our profession is now the least trusted of all. Something we are doing is clearly not working. Let me give an analogy. Voting machines must meet two requirements. They must count the vote accurately, and people must believe they count the vote accurately. The second requirement is distinct from and just as important as the first. Likewise with newspapers. We must be accurate and we must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing on the second requirement. I'll say they're failing also on the first requirement, that half of their reporting is trash, but at least Bezos gets the second part right. Because most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility, and therefore decline in impact, but a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control to increase our credibility. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. Ending them is a principled decision, and it's the right one. Eugene Meyer, publisher of the Washington Post from 1933 to 1946, thought the same, and he was right. By itself, declining to endorse presidential candidates is not enough to move us very far up the trust scale, but it's a meaningful step in the right direction. I wish we had made the change earlier than we did, in a moment further from the election and the emotions around it. That was inadequate planning and not some intentional strategy. Okay, now, he has been accused of basically bending over backwards because he is afraid that Donald Trump is going to come into office and then regulate blue origin. And he says that's not true. He says, I would like to be clear, no quid pro quo of any kind is at work here. Neither campaign nor candidate was consulted or informed at any level or in any way about this decision. It was made entirely internally. When it comes to the appearance of conflict, I'm not an ideal owner of the Post. Every day, somewhere, some Amazon executive or Blue Origin executive or someone from other philanthropies and companies I own or invest in is meeting with government officials. I once wrote that the Post is a complexifier for me. It is, but it turns out I'm also a complexifier for the Post. He says lack of credibility isn't unique to the Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue. And it's not a problem only for media, but for the nation. Many people are turning to off-the-cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions. The Washington Post and New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. Now, again, the part that Bezos is not getting to here is that it is not just a matter of the editorial pages. It is also a matter of the reporting. And I present to you as Exhibit A the fact that the New York Times sent one of its top reporters to me with propaganda from Media Matters in hand in an attempt to cudgel YouTube into shutting down shows like this one. So it ain't just about the perception of bias. The perception of bias is not just about the editorial board, it's about the entire newspaper. And that perception is accurate. These newspapers are, in fact, biased in their content. That perception is not coming from nowhere, but at least Bezos is admitting it. Okay, but here is the problem. He then gets clubbed over the head, just absolutely clubbed. 2 more members of the editorial board at the Washington Post have now resigned after the paper announced it was not endorsing a candidate for president. Molly Roberts is one of those members of the editorial board. She said, let's say that an editorial board has had for decades a long practice of not endorsing candidates for president. This would be an election to reverse that position and take a stand. That the Washington Post editorial board has been forced to do the opposite, dishonors our values, and robs us of our purpose. To be very clear, the decision not to endorse this election was not the editorial board's. It was, you can read the reporting, Jeff Bezos's. By registering my dissent, I don't intend to impugn the conduct of my colleagues, all of whom were put in nearly impossible positions. And then she goes on to talk about how terrible it is and how Donald Trump is not yet a dictator, but he is becoming closer to a dictator. Democracy dies in darkness. And of course, the Washington Post has apparently lost a couple 100,000 subscribers, which is about 8% of the subscriber base of the entire newspaper. Now, why is that? The answer is because the Washington Post has become a left-wing fan club. That is the reason they bleed subscribers when they say they're not going to endorse Kamala Harris. That's why. Because there were no people in the middle or on the right subscribing to the Washington Post. It has become the Washington Compost. It is a compost heap. It is trash. Its reporting on everything from domestic politics to foreign policy is a disaster area, propagandistic ownership by the left. But when Bezos attempts to fix any of it, rebellion occurs. And this is the nature of our media environment. Listen, many in the media are, in fact, propagandists and liars. You've seen that nowhere more than in the Middle East. We are facing a pivotal moment in American history with next week's election, but there's something the legacy media won't tell you. Israel continues to fight for its very survival, facing attacks from enemies on all sides who seek its destruction. Ordinary citizens just like you, people like me, they've left their families to defend their homeland. These brave men and women have been injured fighting for their country's survival. Their families need our help. That's precisely why I've partnered with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Right now, the fellowship is on the ground in Israel, providing real help, food, shelter, security to those who need it most. Just $45, less than the cost of a tank of gas, can help provide essential supplies to a soldier's family during this crisis. Here's what I need you to do right now. Go to benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org to make a gift today. In the face of these many threats, the fellowship's ongoing work providing security to Israelis has never been more important. Remember, benforthefellowship.org. God bless and thank you. Again, they're doing great work on the ground in the Holy Land. The amount of suffering there is truly an amazing and terrible thing. And you can help alleviate that suffering by helping the folks at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Remember, benforthefellowship.org to give. Also, you may have noticed it's election season and the future is on everybody's mind. But you know what should be on your mind? If you think in the far future, death. I know, it came out of nowhere. But here's the thing. No matter what happens over the next 4 years, one thing remains constant: the need to protect your loved ones with some life insurance from Policy Genius. Let's talk about reality for a moment. If something were to happen to you, an anvil falls on your head, would your family be able to cover their expenses? Mortgage payments, college tuition, daily living costs, those don't just go away. Life insurance can ensure your family has the financial support they need, even if you're not around to provide it. Did you know that 41% of Americans don't have the life insurance coverage they need? Don't be part of that statistic. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. They help you find the right life insurance policy at the best price so you can have peace of mind knowing your family is protected. Now I know what you're thinking. Ben, getting life insurance sounds like a pain in the butt. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't have to be. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid those unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius makes it easy. Their licensed support team helps you get what you need fast. They answer questions, handle paperwork, and advocate for you throughout the process. Save time, save money on providing a financial safety net for your family. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro or click that link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. So if that's the way the media environment is, if these are all left-wing outlets masquerading as objective news outlets, now you understand why the New York Times is doing what it's doing. Why MSNBC will attempt to pressure, again, YouTube, places like it, into cutting off podcasts like mine or like Joe Rogan's or anybody else's. The goal is to shut off the competition, because if you can't beat the competition, you have to destroy the competition. That's what's going on. That's the October surprise. And that is a long-standing mission. That is a long-standing mission of all of these left-wing pseudo-journalistic outfits. And it is quite terrible. Well, all of this reeks of alarm, right? If all these places thought that Kamala Harris was winning handily, none of this would be happening. I mean, sure, there would still be soft pushes. You'd still have the New York Times unleashing, back in the old days, Kevin Roose to tweet about how Facebook was being too nice to the Daily Wire. Sure, that would still be happening. But if they thought that Kamala Harris was winning, they'd be a lot more sanguine about things. They'd be a lot more content with the direction of American politics. They are not. They are freaking out. They are freaking out. You can see the freak out happening in real time. So, for example, Whoopi Goldberg over at The View, who is sort of the id of the Democratic Party. Right? If the superego of the Democratic Party is somebody like Pete Buttigieg, then Whoopi Goldberg is the id. Just raging all the time. Full-time rage from Whoopi Goldberg. So here she is. She says you can't vote for Donald Trump because he's going to break up interracial marriages, which is weird because, no, like not even remotely close. But okay, Whoopi, go for it.
He's not going to, say, oh, you're with a white guy, I'm going to keep you from being deported. No, he's going to deport you and put the white guy with someone else. The man is out there.
So her idea is that if Donald Trump wants to end illegal immigration and deport many illegal immigrants, that's so he can marry a white person to another white person. She's psychotic. She has had a psychotic break, folks. And she's on mainstream television every single day. So is Mika Brzezinski. So Mika Brzezinski showed up for the line of the last couple days. They're going to try this turn into a week-long scandal. Okay, the week-long scandal is, are you ready for this? That Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally was a Nazi rally. It was Nazis in Madison Square Garden. Sure, there were a lot of Jews, a lot of black people, a lot of Latinos. Turns out it was a pretty diverse set of Nazis over there at Madison Square Garden. But it was actually just a bunch of diverse Nazis, according to Mika Brzezinski and company. And this is the line that is now going to be tried out. Their closing argument is Donald Trump had Tony Hinchcliffe on the stage, and Tony Hinchcliffe is a roast comedian. It's what he does. He does inappropriate humor. If you watch the Tom Brady roast, that's precisely what Tony Hinchcliffe does. And Tony Hinchcliffe, as you know, did a joke, and he did a bad joke. His bad joke was about Puerto Ricans, and then he told a bad joke about black people, and then he told a bad joke about Jews, which is literally what he does for a living. Now, you can argue with the logic of the Trump-Vance campaign having Tony Hinchcliffe on stage to do this. I, for example, don't think that it is a particularly wise idea to have roast comedians on stage in the final week of an election as you are attempting to broaden your appeal. But what's done is done. A roast comedian who is so widely accepted that he has made significantly worse jokes than this on Comedy Central, now being ripped up and down for making the exact same kind of jokes at a Trump-Vance rally, I don't buy it. But here was Tony Hinchcliffe. These are the jokes that have set off 1,000 think pieces.
It is absolutely wild times. It really, really is. And, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, so the crowd, you can hear the crowd's a little nervous. The crowd doesn't love it too much. Okay, but this is literally what he does for a living. And by the way, this is what all comedians do for a living. George Lopez over the weekend did a Tim Walz event, and he made a very similar joke about Mexicans.
But of course, because this is a Harris Walz event, nobody cares. Here is George Lopez, who apparently has stolen Albert Einstein's hair or something. And he's going off on Mexicans.
Donald Trump said he was going to build a wall. And George Lopez said, you better build it in one day, because if you leave that material out there overnight.
So Mexicans steal things is a perfectly appropriate joke at a Harris Walz rally. But Tony Hinchcliffe says something mean about Puerto Ricans, and it's the end of the world. Now, again, I don't have to like the joke, but can we acknowledge that Tony Hinchcliffe is a comedian? By the way, full credit to Jon Stewart for actually acknowledging the obvious. I mean, a sentence I've never said before. Full credit to Jon Stewart. Here he was actually defending Tony Hinchcliffe.
Now, obviously, in retrospect, having a roast comedian come to a political rally a week before Election Day and roasting a key voting demographic, probably not the best decision by the campaign politically. But to be fair, the guy's really just doing what he does. I mean, here he is at the Tom Brady roast a few months ago.
The great Jeff Ross, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff is so Jewish, he only watches football for the coin toss. Gronk, you look like the Nazi that kept burning himself on the ovens. Kevin is so small that when his ancestors picked cotton, they called it deadlifting.
Yes, of course. Terrible, boo, yes. There's something wrong with me. I find that guy very funny. So, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so again, everyone who does comedy knows what comedy looks like. And again, whether you have them at a rally or not, that's your decision. But pretending that this is like some deliberate slur by the Trump campaign against Puerto Ricans or Jews or black people, you got to be kidding. But again, it plays right into the narrative that the Democratic left is attempting at this point. The desperation narrative. Trump is Hitler and everyone who supports him is a Nazi. Which again, very peculiar for people like me. I feel like I have a pretty solid dog in the not being a Nazi fight. I'm not big on the Nazis. Turns out they killed like a large chunk of my extended family. Thank God my great-grandparents had come here in the early part of the 20th century, but pretty much all the cousins got slaughtered in Europe by the Nazis. It turns out I'm not a big fan of Nazis in the United States either. The neo-Nazis really don't like me very much. I'm also not a fan of the neo-Nazis in the Middle East, who also hate me and people who share my religion and wish to kill all of them. So in the anti-Nazi fight, I feel like I'm like really high on the list of people who hate Nazis, like really, really hate Nazis. So it's weird for me to hear that not only am I a Nazi, Donald Trump is a Nazi. We were both at the Rebbe's OL 3 weeks ago in New York on October 7th, meeting a hostage family. So I'm going to go big no on that one, but this is their closing pitch. Their closing pitch is that Donald Trump is not just a Nazi. If you support him, if you vote for him, you too are Nazi. You're a Nazi. Anytime I can bring out the German accent, it's happening. So here's Mika Brzezinski talking about how this was a Nazi party rally.
We were talking earlier about yesterday's Trump rally from hell at Madison Square Garden. So what did you make of it?
Well, I think it was everything that you need to know about Donald Trump in one weird white nationalist Nazi-type rally. And of course, there's historic parallels to where and when this happened.
Just like the Nazis. Just like them. You had Byron Donalds, a black man, defending Israel as Israeli flags hung from the rafters in Madison Square Garden, and it's all Nazis. This is their closing pitch, guys. They're not desperate at all. But here is Joe Biden trashing Trump's quote-unquote embarrassing New York City rally. I mean, dude, if we're going to talk embarrassing, you should probably stop crapping your pants before you start talking.
Mr. President, can you come here and comment on former President Trump's rally yesterday? He was saying a bunch of stuff about immigrants.
Just simply embarrassing. It's beneath any president, but that's what we're getting used to. That's why this election is so important. You know, most of the presidential scholars I've spoken to talk about the single most consequential thing about a president's character. And he puts that in question every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah, I want to hear more about character from this man, from Joe R. Biden. Want to hear about character from the guy who sent his drug-addled son across the globe to pick up sacks of cash on behalf of the family. Yes, tell me more, Joe, about character. Maybe we can hear more about character from Kamala Harris, who got her start beneath Willie Brown. Like, I want to hear more about character. By the way, again, you open the door to character conversations, your fault. The way that it works in court, typically you're not allowed to bring evidence of character if you are trying somebody. But if the defense brings character evidence, then the prosecution is then allowed to respond with character evidence about the alleged perpetrator. So you guys opened that door. I didn't open the door. You did. You want to talk about it? We can do it all day long. Well, when they're not calling everybody a Nazi, they're just saying that Donald Trump is, of course, a Hitlerian dictator. Nicole Wallace has lost her mind. So Nicole Wallace over at MSNBC, she is like, if Donald Trump is elected, if he is elected, he's going to come to your house in a scream mask and murder your family. I'm not exaggerating. If Donald Trump is elected, he's going to come in a hockey mask on Halloween to your house with a chainsaw, and he's going to go hog wild. Here's Nicole Wallace.
Hi again, everybody. Don't sleep on the men. They heard from Michelle Obama this weekend. It's 5 o'clock in New York in 2016. She told us to go high when they go low. In 2020, she effectively appealed to our better angels. And just a few months ago, she told the pro-democracy Americans among us to, quote, do something. Now, with just over 1 week until Election Day, former First Lady Michelle Obama isn't messing around anymore. Because with women's reproductive health care and freedoms hanging in the balance next Tuesday, the stakes literally are life and death for every woman in America. It's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. It's what happens next week.
The stakes are life and death. Do you understand, women? Do you understand? According to Nicole Wallace, ladies, you will die if Donald Trump is elected. That's correct. You will die. You. Yes, you. You're not having an abortion. Doesn't matter. You will still die. You live in California, which means that your abortion is perfectly legal. You will still die if Donald Trump is elected. In fact, as it turns out, we're all going to die someday. Like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Seriously, this is your closing pitch? All women will die if Donald Trump is elected? No one believes that. In the end, all this is driven by a simple fact. It's driven by one simple fact. On policy, Donald Trump is better than his opposition. I did a debate with Sam Harris, who obviously disagrees with me on this election. Sam and I have had conversations in the past on everything ranging from sort of atheism to politics. We had this conversation. Barry Weiss moderated it over at the Free Press. You should go check it out. It's really worth the watch, I think. And the biggest takeaway for me from that conversation is that if you're on the left, if you're a Kamala Harris supporter, the thing you cannot talk about, that you must not talk about under any circumstances, is actual policy. You cannot talk about what Donald Trump did as president of the United States. You can't. And you can't talk about what she did as vice president of the United States, because if you talk about policy, they lose. And so it has to be a conversation about how there is a dispositive barrier to entry for voting Trump because of January 6th or whatever. Or about how Kamala Harris has made lots of promises, ignore what she did in the past. Or about ignore Donald Trump's first term because now there are no guardrails and because all of his old first term staff is gone, which is not true. Many of them are going to come back. They can't talk policy. And here is Jennifer Rubin just saying the quiet part out loud. Stop talking about his policies, says Jennifer Rubin. Remember, this is the in-house conservative commentator over at the Washington Post.
What we have here is not an ordinary election, but a test of democracy. We do not have two ordinary candidates. We have one candidate who has rejected democracy, rejected pluralism, rejected the rule of law, and to continue to cover him as if there were no difference between the candidate aside from policies does, I think, a great disservice to the American electorate.
Stop talking about policy. That's the dirty secret. That's the dirty secret. Well, folks, Democrats don't want to talk about policy, but there's something that we need to talk about right now. That's efficient business finance management. If you want to know how to run your company's finances smoother than a well-oiled machine, you need to check out Ramp today. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software. It's designed to help you save time and put money back in your pocket. Ramp gives your finance team unprecedented control over company spending. You can issue cards to every employee with actual limits and restrictions, a novel concept in today's world of runaway expenses. Ramp's accounting software automatically collects receipts and categorizes your expenses in real time. No more chasing down receipts. Your employees won't waste hours on expense reports, allowing you to close your books 8 times faster. Unlike most so-called money-saving solutions, Ramp actually puts cash back in your pocket. Businesses using Ramp save an average of 5% in the first year. Plus, it's easier to set up than my son's Lego sets. You can get started, issue virtual and physical cards, start making payments in less than 15 minutes, whether you got 5 employees or 5,000. Right now, get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Shapiro, ramp.com/Shapiro. That's ramp.com/Shapiro. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Terms and conditions do apply. Also, your reminder, Matt Walsh's Am I Racist? Yes, the comedy that's now the biggest documentary of the decade is streaming exclusively over at Daily Wire Plus. Now, if you haven't watched Am I Racist on Daily Wire Plus yet because you think you've already seen everything in theaters, think again. Daily Wire Plus members are getting never-before-seen footage, a very special deleted scene from Matt, an exclusive behind-the-scenes breakdown where Matt reveals exactly how he pulled off the ultimate troll against the left armed with nothing but a man bun. Get ready to see how this record-breaking comedy came together. Watch Matt walk through his step-by-step blueprint for taking on the culture war. If you're not a member yet, now would be the moment. Head on over to amiracist.com. Use code DEI for 35% off your Daily Wire Plus membership. By the way, I should mention at this point, you should also subscribe because we need your help. As you know, the New York Times is attempting to shut down dissemination of all conservative information. They're attempting to cudgel all social media into shutting down our ability to disseminate information. The best platform to get this show and others like it is actually at our platform over at Daily Wire Plus. Just another reason for you to subscribe. We have tons of goodies for you, tons of stuff you're not getting if you're just checking us out on the free platforms. Head on over to dailywire.com right now. Get your Daily Wire Plus membership and use code DEI. You get 35% off today. Meanwhile, the one thing that you should not talk about if you're a Democrat is, the Democratic candidates for president and vice president. Because if you talk about them, it turns out people don't like them because they suck. You really don't want to do it. So why don't we begin with Tim Walz? Because we now have a revelation about Tim Walz. Well, it turns out we know why vice presidential candidate Tim Walz was visiting China so often when he was a youngster. And it was apparently for the nookie. Apparently, according to the Daily Mail, Jenna Wang, the daughter of Bin Hui, who had been an important Communist Party official and served as chairman of a labor union, told the Daily Mail the two of them carried out a secret relationship where they were not allowed to touch or kiss in public. Wang added that although she wanted to marry him and start a family, their relationship eventually took a turn for the worse after he allegedly accused her of being more interested in wanting a U.S. passport than having a marriage. How dare he treat a potential immigrant to the United States this way? How dare he? Vicious, brutal xenophobia. She explained to the Daily Mail that Walz had lied about Tiananmen Square and other things, noting a man like this does not appear to have the character and integrity to do one of the most important jobs. Frankly, I'm just shocked he's straight. Wang said, quote, "We were deeply in love and I wanted to marry him and start a family. When it didn't happen, I felt very unhappy and sad. Tim's behavior was very selfish." So we now know why he was going back and forth to China so much. It was to sleep with the Communist Party official's daughter. And eventually, their daughter would meet a man named Eric Swalwell. Well, meanwhile, I know. Meanwhile, Tim Walz, what's hilarious about Tim Walz is he's a person who says that he's a gun expert who apparently doesn't know how to load a shotgun. And also, he's an assistant volunteer high school football coach who doesn't know shit about football. So, in the last day, he just keeps tweeting stuff that makes no sense if you know, like, the baseline minimum about football. So he tweeted out, oh God, there's such a funny ticket. Tim Walz tweeted out about AOC, quote, "AOC can run a mean pick six and I can call an audible on a play. And we both know that if you take the time to drop a playbook, you're going to use it." Okay, so you can't run a pick six. A pick six is where you throw an interception and the person who intercepts the ball takes it the other way for a touchdown. That's what a pick six is. So if you plan a pick six, that means you're working for the other team, which, come to think of it, Tim Walz, maybe. And then he deleted that one, right? Because it makes no sense because you can't, plan a pick six, or if you do, it makes no sense football-wise to plan a pick six unless you want your team to lose, which, honestly, maybe that's why you picked Tim Walz as your VP candidate. But then he follows that one up with this. This is great. Quote, "It's a tied game, 2 minutes on the clock. We've got the ball and we're driving downfield. Even if we move 1 inch at a time, one phone call at a time, one door knock at a time, we will win this." Nope. Just going to describe to you the conditions on the field. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chicago Bears have the ball. It is 1st and 10. They have 2 minutes on the clock. They must drive down the field. It's a scrum up there. Oh, they handed it off to the running back. He has moved 1 inch. It is now 1st and 10. Up, they hand it to the quarterback. And this time he takes it, he sneaks it, he gets 1 inch. It is now 1st. It is now 3rd and 10. Oh, they're handing it. Oh, look at that. They're giving it to the fullback. He's running it up the middle again. He went 1 inch. It is now 4th and 10. And that's the end of it. That's not how football works, you dumb. Like, first, again, football isn't even my favorite sport. It's like my third favorite sport. I know enough to know that this is idiotic. This is idiotic, but that's because Tim Walz is an idiot. I'm sorry, he's an idiot. And so is the person who's at the top of the ticket. So yesterday, Kamala Harris is just in real time morphing into Selena Meyer from Veep. Just morphing into it. Every clip of her is the thing that you knew was going to emerge. Like a chrysalis, like a butterfly from the chrysalis, the full Kamala Harris is now emerging, and it is hilarious. So you knew it had to happen, right? When they relaunched Kamala Harris 4.0, because 1.0 is when she was in the Senate and she was a radical left-winger, and 2.0 is when she ran for president and she was a radical left-winger, and 3.0 is when they made her vice president and they said that she was going to be awesome, and then she sucked at the job, and 4.0 is this campaign. So Kamala Harris 4.0, they were trying to make it brat and cool and awesome, and she's so charismatic, and she's full of joy, and woo! Well, it turns out she is radically awful at this. So bad, so bad. So these are just some clips from yesterday. These are just some clips from yesterday of Kamala Harris. My favorite. I'm going to start with my favorite because I can't help myself. This is so great. So they're all chanting her name, and she proceeds to go full Selena Meyer or full Michael Scott on this thing. Here we go.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that.
Oh my God. And everybody goes silent. Everyone's like, what? Why would I shout my own name? That doesn't even make any sense. And then she's like, she goes a full Kamala crazy laugh. It's so great. It's so great. You want this for 4 years, do you? This is your thing? This is your bag? You want this? You want it? Okay, how about that time that she asked to touch semiconductors? Yeah, this is a thing that happened yesterday as well. Just going place to place, being weird, because she's a weird lady. Here she was being a weirdo.
Here is actually a harvested U-rod where we actually do grow it. So this is what it looks like when it comes out our process of that. Do not touch it.
Do not. Yes. I'm glad I asked.
Please do not touch any of the
Do not touch. Guys, touch it.
Yeah, very sharp.
Okay, and shiny.
And she says they're very shiny. The semiconductors are very shiny. She's like an idiot child. She's like a child. Honest to God, my 4-year-old wouldn't even say that. Like my son, who's 1.5 and is barely learning to talk, might say that, but I think he's smarter than she is at this point. Like wow. Can I touch it? Is it made of semiconductor? Ooh, look, it's so shiny. Ooh, I love shiny things. Shiny things is good. Ooh. Don't worry, she's so smart. She's so smart, guys. She's brilliant. We know she's brilliant because everybody keeps saying she's brilliant. I've seen no evidence she's brilliant, but they keep saying it, so it's probably true. So she was also asked yesterday what she would do as president. A fairly good question. Seems like an obvious question. What would you do as president? She's asked this by Shannon Sharpe, who was interviewing her in his spare time when he wasn't, banging people live on a stream. But in any case, Shannon Sharpe asks Kamala Harris what she's going to do as president. She has no answer. She has no idea. That seems like the baseline question, right? Like if there's two big questions that you're going to be asked Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, question number 1 is going to be, what are you going to do as president? And number 2 is going to be, how's it different than Joe Biden? And she has the answers to neither of them, but she does like shiny things. She does like shiny things, shiny objects. Woo. Here we go. Our brilliant, charismatic, magnetic vice president.
So what I'm talking about doing right now is based on longstanding work. It's not new. But as President of the United States, part of why it is important is it is a new approach to that job. It is about a new way that is based on a new generation of leadership, that is based on new ideas, and frankly, a different experience that brings my commitment to the work I am talking about into being.
The levels of visceral rage, I feel, when someone says absolutely nothing with perfect 100% sneering confidence, that is who she is. She is awful. She's so awful. She says nothing. She just rambles and babbles about nothing for like a full 45 seconds right there. But she says so with like the hand motion, and she's lecturing you about things that you should know. They're perfectly obvious. But when we do the work, that's filled with work, and then the work that we do is important work because work is, in fact, important based on the work and complexity of others in the context of what we believe. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no reason to be running. No one knows what you're talking about. No one. The entire campaign for Kamala Harris is I'm not Donald Trump. I get it. I get that's the campaign. I'm just pointing out she ain't nothing. She ain't got nothing. Her campaign has nothing. It's an empty campaign. It's a campaign about nothing. It's the Seinfeld of campaigns. Joining us on the line is Ryan Gadursky. He, of course, is a political strategist, writer, and commentator known for his work in conservative media. And now he's been banned from CNN. Ryan, thanks for joining the program. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. What a title.
Yeah, no, I mean, congratulations. Congratulations. I mean, I think it takes a certain kind of man to be banned from CNN, namely a man with testosterone. But in any case, you are also the founder, of course, of the 1776 Project PAC, which is doing an amazing job on school boards across the country. So why don't you take us through the saga of being on CNN, debating an entire panel, which you do pretty much every night, or did until very recently. And you are faced with Mehdi Hasan, who is a Qatari propagandist who has spent basically his entire career doing terror apologism. And that's when things get spicy.
Yeah, so I got on the show, and the producers had texted me right beforehand, switching up all the segments, which, like, it's not uncommon they were going to do. And there was now going to be 2 segments on the Trump rally instead of segments on war and, like, another major issue. We're going to do 2 segments on the Trump rally. So I was going in there and very annoyed the fact that I was having to talk about a joke from a comedian who I honestly, no offense to him, but I didn't know who he was 48 hours or 72 hours ago. So I was irritated about that. We get into the green room, and then this is it. They changed one. They added one segment. It was going to be called about the Jeff Bezos op-ed about accuracy and trust in the media, featuring special guest Brian Stelter. And I was literally rolling my eyes right over my head. And I was like, this is a joke. This man lied so routinely. He had Stormy Daniels' lawyer on, everything about Russiagate. This is a huge hack in the media. So I made that decision that night that I was going to tell him he needed to apologize for all the lies that he said. And I was like, this is my last night on CNN. They're never going to have me back. I'm going to call him out on the network. Anyway, then they had on Mehdi, and I began to set, and Ashley Allison, who sat next to me, the woman sitting next to me, we start watching all the clips and about the Kill Tony clips. And she started making comments about, like, oh, this is white man humor, which, once again, very irritated. Had I said that, like in race reversals, I wouldn't even made it on the show. But, you know, I understand the hypocrisy and the double standards. We do the segment, and I said that people in the media said that every Republican who attended that rally were fascists and Nazis, which Abby said that's not true. And I was like, that is 100% true. So now this is like the 3rd strike in a row. I'm very annoyed that I'm on with Brian later about accuracy in the media, Ashley's comments, and then Abby calling me saying I wasn't accurate about something I knew I was accurate about. So then Mehdi basically sits there and refers to me as he refers to me and my other conservative co-panelists as Nazis on air. I have never crossed paths with this man before. I've never tweeted him before. I've never talked to him before. I've never watched him on TV before, truthfully. So then I was like a little stunned, and I said, and he goes, "Oh, Trump is quoting Goebbels." I go, you're saying that? You who are regularly called an anti-Semite? And he goes, yeah, by you. Me? I've never called you an anti-Semite before. I don't know who you are. What are you talking about? And then he goes, yeah, for saying for Palestine. In the moment, in the heat of the moment, I thought he said Hamas, but, you know, interchangeable. I sat there and said, I thought he said Hamas. And I go, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. It was a joke. It was honestly a joke. Ashley went crazy. They went crazy. Abby kept telling me, please stop talking so that way, like, we can get control over the segment. I felt bad for Abby because it's her job as host to sit there and have some decorum. So I apologized to, like, get control of the segment. The segment ends. We go to commercial break, and Mehdi storms off the air. We're all silent, and he storms off the air, and he was like, I'm not going to be on with him. And Abby goes, is he leaving? And then Ashley Allison was like, I think he should leave, pointing at me. And Abby was like, you know, we really can't do this on the network. I said, I get it. Perfectly nice to me. I said to the producer afterwards, I didn't mean to get you in any trouble if I did. And then I left. Like, it's nothing. So I'm not going to be on CNN anymore. Like, my life will go on. But it was the double standard and the hypocrisy where he said over and over and over. And then to issue a statement as if he didn't just call 2 guests Nazis on air and then accuse the other one who has never met him of calling him an anti-Semite, which I have never done. Not that he isn't one, but I've never done it. So that is.
I mean, he is one. So if
like
you
the
had, you would have been
whole-
perfectly justified in doing so. But, I'll say it. He is. And he's a terror apologist. And he's always been a terror apologist. My friend Douglas Murray has debated him multiple times on this particular issue. So not only would you have been right on the merits to say that, you didn't actually say that. And then you made a throwaway joke after he called not just people on the air Nazis and not just the attendees at Madison Square Garden, but by extension, all Trump supporters, which would be, at least 48% of the population Nazis. That is perfectly acceptable on CNN. If you make a joke about him, however, because he's part of the sort of intersectional structure that CNN is attempting to build, then you have violated the rules and you must confess.
Very much so. And it's just a double standard. And I knew like this was my last night anyway, because I was going to sit there and go after Brian Stelter for all of his negative comments. But I was like, you know what? It is what it is. It's stupid cable news stuff. And it's just the outrage machine in the moment, and it'll pass, and that'll be that. Like, this is what it is. And I have no apologies to it. I was on there 4 times on that show. I talked about the Ferguson effect. I talked about, minorities leaving the Democratic Party. I spoke about mass immigration and how it will change our policy with Israel. I talked about real things. And it is very rare on cable news, on almost any program, that you get the moment to sit there and do something and take the chance, because everyone's so hungry to stay on the network that they'll say anything to just promote it. So I didn't do that. Very proud of myself. Thought the joke was funny. Whatever. It's all, it's fine.
Well, Ryan, honestly, I think that you did a service because, exposing CNN for what it is actually, I think, the best thing that you could have done. It's great to have you on the network and giving a conservative opinion once in a while, just to mix things up, like a little bit of pepper in the stew of trash that CNN usually represents. But I think that you've actually done an enormous service to the world by demonstrating the insane double standard that CNN holds while they proclaim that they are an objective news organization. Again, their guests and hosts can routinely call half of America Nazis. But if you say about a person who has taken Qatari money in the past, worked for Al Jazeera, and is effectively an apologist for terrorism, constantly excusing, making justifications for terrorism, if you make a joke about that guy, you're gone. So, frankly, anything that exposes CNN, I'm for. So good. I'm glad. I'm kind of glad.
Well, I appreciate your support and everyone's support. And, whatever, my main fight's over school boards and the 1776 Project PAC. So that's really what I'm focused on. And it's not like they were going to give me a show on CNN. It's not like they were going to sit there and say, oh, he's the man of the hour. It was an hour for me to sit there and get screamed at and try to pepper in some truth in the middle of it. And I had some fun while it lasted, but it's, I shined bright and I burned out. So that's fine.
Well, like a beautiful comet in the sky, Ryan Girdusky's time over on CNN. Go check out his actual day job, the 1776 Project PAC. That's 1776projectpac.com. Ryan, really appreciate the time. And congrats on having some free time.
Thank you.
Alrighty, guys, coming up, we'll be jumping into the actual issues in the campaign that Kamala Harris doesn't want us to talk about. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.